Welcome everyone to this new episode of this podcast. I have the pleasure to welcome here today Chad Wasilenkoff. He's the CEO of Helicoid Industry. Chad, really happy to have you on board today.
Pleasure to be here.
Perfect. So, Chad, we're going to discuss. I have like a lot of questions for you, specifically because like you have a pretty impressive background with all the different investments that you've been making, and you've been pretty successful, like growing some specific companies, and as well, like I want to discuss about your latest ventures, which is Eliquid industry, and specifically like what's the innovation that this company is bringing for the aerospace and defense industry. So. Let's start first with a couple questions about like your background. If you can just tell us a little bit more the background. How did you ended up to start to invest in different companies?
Sure. So I'm sort of known as a serial entrepreneur. I've been starting investing since I was a little kid. It actually started, we lived near a golf course in Canada. And so I would jump over the fence and get into the ponds and the bushes and collect golf balls and sell them back to the golfers. By the time I'm 10, I have multiple kids working for me. I'm paying them in chocolate bars. And then my parents were great and super supportive. And so back when I was around 12 years old, I wanted one of the first video games, the Atari 2600. My parents said I had to pay for it myself. I didn't want to part with the money, so my parents showed me the thing called a classified ad. So I went, looked up 4 of them, figured it out on a map because we didn't have smartphones back then, drove around the city, and I actually bought 3 out of the 4 that night and sold them back in the paper the next week. So then ended my golf ball endeavors, and I started buying and selling everything I was interested in. Video games, skateboards, BMX bikes. By the time I'm 14, 15, I'm buying and selling artwork, gold, diamonds, all kinds of things. Buying and selling cars long before I had a driver's license.
Wow.
And it just continued from there. So once I finished university, I migrated into the stock market, started investing in companies. Next thing you know, I was buying and selling and owning more than 10% of a company. Then it just made sense to buy the whole company. So I've bought, built, and grown over 30 companies, very diverse. I view myself as an investor first and foremost, but I get really involved, obviously, in the company. I have no time frame. But of these 30 plus companies I've bought, built, and grown, I've owned things like I had the banknote mill in Switzerland. So we made all the Swiss francs, the euros for dozens of countries. I had a couple of pulp mills in Canada. I had gold mines in Ecuador, tequila in Mexico, medical devices, software, all kinds of things. Now I'm down to two companies, and one of them is the Helicoid that you mentioned before.
Wow, that's amazing. So if I want to dive more a little bit more about like your strategy. So since your background is really like on the investment side, how do you on the first companies that you bought, you say like you had like some kind of like minority share on those companies. At what point did you decide to get like a higher stake on the company, and how was your involvement in the strategy on the company and on the execution of a specific strategy with a very specific strategy in mind? Can you
Sure.
share more about that?
Yeah, again, it was just with success and then trying to deploy the capital properly. And again, it takes just as much effort to buy 10% of a larger company. I'd rather buy a smaller company, but own 100%, and then get to get more involved, really put my shoulder behind it, and try to grow that business. Just because I own it, I don't expect it to be worth more the next day. So, I do put the time, effort, build a team. Often I'll change the strategy. So each one of these 30 plus investments have had a different reason or rationale behind them. As an example, one of the companies I built was in uranium. So I fell in love with uranium. I was looking at the supply-demand paradigm that was going on. The world had not been looking for uranium because it had been around $8 a pound, and it's not economical to go dig it up out of the ground. And that's because there was decommissioning of Russian warheads were going on for decades. And that's what was funding these nuclear reactors. They'd announced that's coming to an end. I speculated there'd be a bubble, or at least a quick movement into uranium exploration. So I went to the world's largest uranium company, Cameco, got an asset that they had spent over $40 million developing. I got it for $10,000 because the asset was out of favor and nobody was looking at uranium. 18 months later, I built that company, took it public, and grew it to $125 million. Other companies, again, I often will look for things that are out of favor. I bought a wallpaper mill in Germany. Everyone said wallpaper. Nobody uses wallpaper. I paid 5 million euros for it. It was profitable at the time. Over the 6-7 years I owned and ran it, I changed out management. We changed the product mix. So we dividended out probably $20 million and then sold it to Gladfelter on the New York Stock Exchange for $210 million. Bought assets from the Bank of Canada. Again, all these public the publicly traded ones. I can't talk about the ones that were private because obviously were NDAs. But I bought assets off the Bank of Canada for $500,000, and 3 years later, we sold it for $17.5 million. So it's been very diverse. Each one is different. Even the banknote mill, it was not a great business. It's an old, mature business. Things, as we know, are all going to electronic payments and credit cards, things like that. But there are always going to be banknotes, and it was a very attractive deal. So I paid $7.5 million for that one. Again, it was a public company, or took it public after I acquired it. I paid $7.5 million for it. There was $4 million of finished good inventory in the basement, so we sold that off and recouped more than half our investment. Then we sold the ancillary farmland that came with that mill for 12.5 million Swiss francs. Then we sold the water rights and a 4.8 megawatt turbine for 18.5 million Swiss francs. Then I approached and sold the land and building to a multi-billion-dollar Swiss pension fund for 55 million. And then ultimately sold the business back to the Swiss National Bank for 21.5 million, all on a $7.5 million initial acquisition. That took 13 years, so it didn't happen quick or overnight. And again, lots more examples, but each one has been unique and interesting. The gold mines in Ecuador, the person who actually put those properties together had developed numerous mines, had a great track record, but gold was out of favor. So acquired that for $1 million all-share deal. Obviously took it public, and that grew to a $450 million market cap, with Canada's largest natural resource investment firm fund owning over 20% of it by the end of it. So, another successful project.
And each time what I see is that your investment strategy is like opportunity driven based on the analysis that you see and the strategy that you made, but it's not linked to, let's say that you have a core team that is able to do like this kind of execution or a specific type of execution and operation. And then you try to find companies that could benefit from that. It's more like you identify the situation, you identify like an opportunity, and from that opportunity you decide like what kind of strategy should I run and what is the potential, should I sell the company at some point based on what I analyze. That's correct.
Yes, yeah, and basically it's kind of like private equity shop, but it's not a shop. I'm just a one-man show. I don't generally have partners, and each company is so different. I have to build out an industry-specific management team. So usually I find and identify the opportunity. It can be a startup, so acquiring some technology and build it from the ground up. It can be an existing mill that's underutilized, or just an opportunity to get some leverage going into an industry that I think is about to grow or take off, and trying to get a foothold in it. Usually at a high-cost producer, as an example, is a great way to get a foothold into a new industry that it's about to grow, because they're limited profitability, so you can, again, buy them quite attractively, probably below breakup value. And then if the estimate or the guess is correct and things take off for their underlying pricing for their product, the leverage is great. So as another example, I bought some paper mills, as I mentioned. I was looking for a president, so I hired industry-specific people. Through that interview, the person obviously didn't come from these specific paper mills. They were very niche mills. So I was saying, okay, give me examples of your background, your experience. What would you do? Or in fact, you just don't know enough about my mills that I want you to come and run. So tell me what you're doing and what excites you, or how you're dealing with your daily challenges. And from just explaining his company and his industry, he was operating in dissolving pulp. I fell in love with that industry. So I did more research, more due diligence, and then I decided I was going to build a dissolving pulp mill. These things are a couple $1 billion. So the best way to do it was to buy an old, antiquated paper pulp mill that was high cost and do the conversion into this dissolving pulp. It needs about a 10% retrofit. But I was able to acquire 2 mills in Canada. One was approximately a $1.5 billion mill. It had gone bankrupt and was closed. I bought it for $1.4 million. The second was a larger, more advanced mill. It was about a $2 billion asset with significant environmental problems. It took 18 months, but I convinced the government that if I was going to turn this on, they would need to take the environmental issues. So we had to change legislation in Canada to get this done. But they were obviously focused on job creation and turning this very valuable mill back on, but nobody was going to touch it with environmental problems. So again, bought both of those, converted them to dissolving pulp. And I should mention, out of the 30 companies or plus that I built, I've only had 2 that didn't work out, and those pulp mills, unfortunately, were one of them. That mill, as I said, was making dissolving pulp, and all of Canada, the United States, and Brazil got hit with a anti-dumping duty of 43%. So there's just not enough margin to be able to make the product. So we convinced Canada to fight it in the World Trade Organization. They actually won. The dumping duty was supposed to be removed, but China decided not to remove it. And Canada had a choice to retaliate, and they said, we're not going to get into a trade war with China over one small little industry dissolved pulp. So ultimately, those mills went bankrupt again, unfortunately, because of these tariffs and anti-dumping duties.
Mm. Okay, so with those different companies evolving in different industries and different environments, what is your process to kind of like, because once you identify like what is the vision, what is the strategy for the company, I guess like you need to surround yourself with actual like expert that has been in the industry for a long time. So what is your process to build a team to reach to achieve that strategy?
Yeah, it all starts with due diligence. So when I find an opportunity, I'm not an expert in it. I immerse myself. I try to go to conferences. I try to meet industry specific people. Ultimately, I try to hire the best people I can possibly find to do the final due diligence. There's no way I
Mm,
can know these industries as well as somebody that's been in for 25 or 30 years. And it's all that little minutia is where you can get yourself in real trouble, not knowing
mm,
that, hey, the competitor is doing something else, or there's some groundbreaking technology that is not really well known yet, but it's going to be a category killer and harm the existing opportunity I'm trying to acquire. So again, I try to
mm,
find industry specific people to do the due diligence. And at the end of it, oftentimes they say, this is unbelievable. I want to join your company, or I'm willing to join your company. Or I ask them outright, will you join? If they won't, why won't you? Well, it's not that interesting. Okay, great, I'll pass. So I've done lots of deals where I've spent 18 months and $500,000 in due diligence and then walked away. It just wasn't the right fit. And I'm glad I did it, because everything I get behind it, I know I'm into it for 3, 5, 10, 15 years. I don't have a time horizon. And every day I got to get up and keep pushing it forward and driving it. And there's always ups and downs, and things take longer. The old cliche, and cost more money. It's always the case, but that's fine. So every day we just try to add value, make it bigger and better, and someday a liquidity event to happen. So again, these are not family-owned businesses where it's been passed down from generation to generation. Every company I buy, build, or grow is for sale every day. And if it's just somebody needs to knock on the door, but in the meantime, seeing as I own it, I may as well try to make it more valuable day after day. I also build these teams with very generous equity packages, all performance-based, but every person in every one of my companies owns shares in it. And so again, we're all pushing in the same direction, and they understand it's going to be a grind, but they're along for that grind, and they're there for the win at the end too, though.
No, that's amazing. What is what is the size of the pipeline? So you say like how many opportunities do you typically like look at before starting the due diligence, and how many opportunities do you like look at, like for example every year, just to get like a sense of how many deals?
Sure. So a perfect example that's going on right now. So my 15-year-old son has obviously been watching what I've been doing, and he wants to get involved. And so he's now decided to homeschool over the last 3 or 4 months. So it frees up his time to be able to work with me, shadow me. And I said, okay, let's build a company together. Obviously, I'm going to do everything, but he'll be involved in all these meetings, discussions, and things like that. And so the first thing I did is told him to let's build something small. Don't get too aggressive. But yet, so I sent him off to these technology transfer offices at multiple major universities around the country. He's brought me over 400 patents. We've reviewed them. I don't just read it. That does him no good. So we read them together. I explain why I think this one's worth pursuing, this one's not. We've probably narrowed it down to about 20 to 25, of which we've had conversations with. And now we've shortlisted it down to 2. So just in the last 3 or 4 months, I've looked at hundreds of potential deals, but only dug deeper again on a couple dozen, and now had multiple meetings on these 2. One is with a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, and it's pretty spectacular, early stage, but pretty spectacular technology.
Mm.
So it's lots of blue sky, and in an industry that would attract a lot of investment dollars. I think I can get a lot of grant money. Like I mentioned that before, but for all my various companies, I've raised over $1 billion, and probably about 400 or 500 million in various government financings as well, grants and things like that.
So are you always trying to find opportunities with technology patents, or do you try to look at companies which have been like not well managed? Or where do you think like you can find like more opportunities?
Yeah, all of the above. So again, all I know is if I buy something, it's not, as I said before, it's not going to be worth more money the next day just because I own it.
Mm,
So I have to have a game plan or an idea of why is it going to be worth more in a certain time frame. I don't
mm,
like plan on 15, 20-year time frame. Hopefully I have a reason, and there's some shorter term catalyst. So I bought assets that, again, underutilized or making the wrong product. That was my wallpaper mill, that was my banknote mill, that was my 2 pulp mills, things like that. The gold mines, again, gold was just out of favor, same with uranium. those were opportunistic from the commodity price, and I had a thesis of why I felt the commodity was undervalued and would turn at some point. I didn't know if it was going to be months or years, but either way, great time of the business cycle to invest. And then with the technology, again, same thing. I, I kind of laugh. I do a lot of mentoring and actually mentor professors at a couple of universities and talk to business school and entrepreneurial school kids. And the one thing, they always teach you is, hey, look at the SAM and the TAM and how big is the market. Do some customer evaluations, and I kind of laugh a little bit, even though that's the standard practice. When I hear of an opportunity, it needs to be so obvious that every person would say, wow, that's going to be big and huge. Hey, I've found a way to make semiconductors smaller and cheaper. That's the end.
Mm.
That's the end of research, so to speak. I'm not saying the due diligence is finished, but that part of it is so obvious that, hey, this is worth pursuing and looking into. Is it real? Can it actually do this? Are what they're professing to happen? Can it happen? And if it's at lab scale, that's fine. It just means it's going to take longer and de-risk it, but you can get a more attractive entry point. But the market needs to be so big and interesting because it takes just as much time and effort to build a small little company, even down to a hot part. If you want to do it right, you got to get all the permits, and you got to do the incorporation, then you got to get the suppliers, and then you got to do some marketing and branding. You may as well do it with a bigger company. And same thing when you go to get investment dollars, which I typically get external investors in most of my companies. It's just an extra zero or 2 zeros sometimes, but it still takes about 100 meetings and presentations to get one investor to close. And again, it's just a different audience I'm talking to, because I'm talking to some people on a startup. Hey, do you want to invest 100 or a couple $100,000? Or in a larger company, do you want to invest 50 or $100 million? It's the same amount of presentations and time and effort. So may as well do something larger. It's actually be a little intimidating to people, but once you've done a couple, they're all the same, surprisingly.
Larger on the potential of the company, or larger on the potential, like the size of the company that you buy for an acquisition?
Larger on the state that the company is in. So I bought companies that have 300-400 employees and doing over 100 or a couple hundred million in sales at the time I acquire it. Obviously, it sounds bigger and more complex than a startup, but arguably, actually, the startup can be more work. So there are various stages, but they all require 18-hour days, 7 days a week. And as the founder, CEO, and largest shareholder, whenever there's a problem, they call. It's the only thing. Nobody ever calls to give me good news. They send an email real quick, and we celebrate for about 30 seconds. But I have too much work to do, and it's always solving problems and figuring things out. Again, I also bring that upon myself. Often I buy companies that have problems, and that's why I can get them so attractive. And then I got to go in and fix and solve it, where others tend not to tread, like that pulp mill with a massive environmental problem and birth defects downstream. I mean, it was not a small issue, and that's why a multi-billion-dollar asset was acquired for $1. But it took 18 months of heavy lifting and no guarantee it was going to happen at the end. But the structure, and I was super proud of the deal we put together. As I said, it was won Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Awards for that particular deal. It was great, but it took a long time, and at the end of it, right up to the last minute, it almost fell apart. The government was trying to squeeze me, and I wouldn't accept it, and somebody had to blink, and luckily they did, and I closed on it.
No, that's really, really impressive, Chad. And thank you for sharing all of that. I want to start to talk like a little bit more about like your current company, Eliquid Industry. Did you follow like exactly the same process? Did you identify that company, that technology, I would say, like through studying like the different patents with the university, or did you find that company in a different process?
Yeah, so this one was a little bit different. So I was volunteering University of Riverside in California and San Diego. I also do some volunteering for things like Shark Tank type of events. And with that, I was out with a couple of these groups, and I said, you guys have all these, it's a collective group of universities called the Regents. I said, you guys do hundreds of millions of dollars of research every year. You have in-house patent lawyers because you accomplish so much and have some great, interesting things going on. What's the most advanced, ready to commercialize in a big industry that has truly disruptive technology? And I'm agnostic in terms of my investment. And the people all said, it's this Helicoid. So they explained to me what it was. I'll be honest, it sounded too good to be true. But I did the deep dive, did as much research as I could. I've never been involved in composites before. By composites, think carbon fiber, fiberglass, things like that. Put it all together, and that one took about a year. Hired an individual to do due diligence. He was formerly at Boeing for 35 years, all in composites, 64 composite patents in his name. He was in charge of projects for $30 million at Boeing to try to reduce the weight, take 2 or 3 pounds out of the plane. and Boeing was willing to commit, 20, $30 million per project for that. And he came back at the end and said, this is going to take tens of thousands of pounds out of a plane. And he asked me, he said, I'd like to join the company and I'd like to work for equity, no cash compensation. I want to have some ownership of this. And I said, absolutely. So he joined on our board of directors and chief technology officer. We agreed he's not available full time. So I usually only bring him in during aerospace applications. But as an example, I can talk about some of the companies. We have over half a dozen aerospace companies that we work with now. Several of them, one time, this individual is named Doug McCarville. His microphone wasn't working. And we finished an hour-long presentation with an aerospace company and 8 engineers. And they said, at the end, we're unfortunately going to have to do this again. We really need to hear and want to know Doug's opinion. We know his track record. We've worked with him in the past. He's such a credible asset to your company. And we need to make sure with everything you said, Doug believes in. We have some more questions for him. So again, he added a ton of credibility and opened a lot of doors for us. And things, been smooth sailing since then, with the exception of a little slowdown during COVID, obviously, to put everything on the rails or on hold for a while. But, that's how that company came to be. And then from there, we continued to grow. And again, I always try to build out these management teams. One of the early presentations was to DuPont. So started with some individuals there. They said, this is quite interesting. So they escalated it to the global head of innovation worldwide out of Lausanne. This person specialized in composites. He was actually in charge of all innovation, but he did have a lot of composite experience with Kevlar for about 15 or 16 years of his career. So he understood it very well. We advanced to half a dozen or more engineers in these meetings, and it was going nicely. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit. So we didn't know how long we were going to be down. But that individual then contacted me personally and said, "I'm willing to leave DuPont to join your company." So he left and joined us. So again, a couple of great people now have joined our company that have a way more experience and understanding, and the fact that they feel this passionate and strongly and see what a beneficial change we can make in this industry. It's been great. And so now we're up to maybe about a dozen people. Also interesting, when I started this company, because I had a lot of manufacturing experience, I thought we were going to build composite parts, wind turbine blades, hockey sticks, and things like that. And then I realized through the due diligence, through the research, and also through talking to these people, we can have impact on tens of thousands of products. Why would I want to make a hockey stick and compete with these 2 big companies, CCM and Bauer? They own about 95% market share. They're going to try to stop us from being successful. So I'm going to have to build a marketing team and a branding team and build a factory to make hockey sticks. And then it's going to take me capital versus license.
Maybe Chad, just like before, like talking about the business model, because I think it's important. Let's just very quickly touch on like what is the technology, because we didn't touch on that point. Where does that technology come from? What is the innovation, I would say? And yes, and I'm very, very interested about like which business model you choose to address that.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so Helicoid is a internal architecture for composites. So the impetus and the research started on, it's called a Mantis Shrimp. It's off the coast of Vietnam. It has these clubs that smash hard-shelled prey. It's the fastest movement of any organism on the planet with these clubs.
No.
It's faster than a 22 caliber bullet. It boils the water. It goes so fast. And it does it tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 times without breaking. So the researchers said, how is this possible? What is that crazy material that they're made of? They found out it's not the material, but the internal architecture of the way it's made. And so that the way it's done is the fibers are at 0 degrees. Imagine if you have a table in front of you, all the fibers going directly away from you, that's 0. Rotate it left or right, doesn't matter. But if you rotate it to the left, keep going to the left and keep stacking unidirectional material. And that shape it makes is called a helicoid. And so what they also found as they continued their research, they found over 50 other high-performing organisms on the planet. Like there's a beetle in California, you can drive over it with a steamroller and it won't break. It too has evolved over hundreds of millions of years with this helicoid architecture. That's the way I like to explain it, the basics, physics of how it works. If you imagine carbon fiber in your BMW or Mercedes or what have you, or you've seen it in all kinds of products, fibers are crossed at 90 degrees. So there's that small square where the fibers cross to transfer energy. If you can't transfer any more energy, but there is more energy, the fibers break. And obviously, you'll have a catastrophic failure. If you go on a shallow angle, there's much more surface area. You can imagine if it's rotated all the way around, significantly more surface area to transfer the same energy before you have fiber breakage and catastrophic failure. So the results we've achieved in carbon fiber, fiberglass, and things like that, using the exact same material, the same resin, the same thickness, the same everything, we get a 20-30% performance improvement generally across the board, and then we can tailor it. So not all helicoids are the same. So if you just went 8 layers on a 15-degree rotation, you might actually have worse performance than what you have now. But by tailoring it, are you looking at lots of little impacts, like the leading edge protection of a wind turbine blade? So many, many
Mm.
little impacts. Or is it one ballistic impact, super high force? Again, we tailor that. And then what we also do is tailor it based on the material, whether it's carbon fiber, and even which carbon fiber and which toe and how thick it is and what resin. What we're trying to do is find that sweet spot to promote as much energy dissipation, and we actually want the resin to crack rather than the fibers break, and then eventually it will all break. But we can get a lot more load, so we increase the structural components, we increase impact resistance. We're now working with probably about 50 companies around the world at various stages of testing and trials and things like that. Most of them are under NDAs. A few we're allowed to talk about with EV battery enclosures and things like that.
Okay, so basically, with this technology, how does that work? So, you guys contact like a specific customer, which have like a specific use case on a specific industry. They typically tend to have like already like a composite design, and you basically discuss with them. I mean, obviously, sign the NDA, try to understand like what is their use case, and basically tell them with our patented technology, we could potentially improve your current design to get like better efficiency in terms of resistance to impact and maybe like keeping like the same mechanical requirements, I would say. That's how it works. And coming back to the business model that you were discussing, you were saying that you're not the technology, the patent, or the design. How does that work exactly?
Sure. And so most of the conversations start with a short PowerPoint presentation to explain the technology. And obviously, we have multiple PowerPoints based on if they're EV company or a defense contractor or sporting goods or in this case, aerospace. So we go through those kinds of presentations. If there's interest, and we sign a mutual NDA, we share all the information. What piece or part are they interested in improving? Is it increasing the performance, or is it reducing the weight? It could be a combination of both. Or sometimes it's just a change of material. Hey, we're using this really expensive carbon fiber. We'd like to use this poorer performing, cheaper carbon fiber, but we can't sacrifice the performance. Well, we can accomplish that too. So each customer is different, and each helicoid is different, both the angle of rotation for what they're targeting, but in a specific piece or part, sometimes we have multiple different helicoids because obviously some things are getting more impact, some are more structural and different strains on that particular uniquely shaped piece, part, or component. Like a hockey
Mm.
stick, the blade, the puck, the shaft, though, is totally different, and it flexes and then it snaps back or gets hit with a slash from another hockey stick. So again, they have different performance requirements on the same piece or part. So once we have that in place, we work with the team. We will do FEA simulation software, which we have as proprietary. If we have good material cards and really understand the carbon fiber they want to work with, or the fiberglass or whatever it is, and resin card, you can use the various standard Abacus or other software programs. And we have our plug and play on top. It's ours that we don't share, obviously, but it's with all the helicoid information and data. We've spent over $12 million in various research to date, and all that goes into that proprietary software. So we have a really good understanding of how the helicoid is going to operate and work based on what we're trying to target. Then we get about a 95% success rate in our simulation software. So then we'll make some coupons, or the customer makes coupons, and they do testing. Usually the customer does that themselves because they have the industry-specific test. It's the air gas gun for baseball bats. The hockey stick people have their own tests, player testing, tennis rackets, things like that. And of course, on the aerospace, they do even more rigorous testing. They'll have to get all their regulatory approvals as they go down the path. Then usually at the end of that, we can demonstrate 20% plus type of improvements, and then we look to implement a license model. So they can still make their own piece and part, but if they want to utilize the helicoid, they'll have to get the benefit of our software that helped perfect it, our know-how, and our family of patents. We have about a half a dozen patents around the world, all related to the helicoid. And then we move on. And some companies want exclusivity and some don't. And again, it depends on the piece of part and the relationship and what we're trying to do and accomplish in that space. But we're pretty flexible. As I said earlier, there's tens of thousands of products this is applicable to. So on the hockey sticks, we were fine. We got one of the large players, CCM. They signed up. They wanted exclusivity, so that's fine. So we moved on. Now we're making pickleball rackets this month, and next month we're making protective enclosures for the bottom of the ocean, and probably the month or two after that will be a couple more EV battery enclosures, and then longer term we'll get some of our aerospace customers across the finish line. Several of them are working on engine containment rings. So obviously you have the turbine. Unfortunately, if you get a bird strike on the turbine blade, you can have a blade off of it that could take the plane down. So they build these carbon fiber engine containment rings. So we've already demonstrated we can take out of a standard commercial size aircraft engine containment ring, we can take $37,000 worth of raw material out of it. We can reduce the weight by approximately 17%. And based on fuel price, if we have to pick a number and get an estimate, but based on the average life expectancy of that piece or part, it should result in about a $5 million fuel efficiency for that commercial aircraft. But you get the immediate cost savings of producing it and then the long-term benefits of fuel efficiency. We're getting the same kinds of results in our anything we're doing for the automotive and EV batteries. We're taking significant cost out of the front end, significant weight out to give the batteries much longer range, which all the customers are liking.
Wow, that's really impressive. Especially as well, there's right now there is not many programs that are, actually like the A350, the 787 from Boeing using like a lot of composites. So there's definitely a lot of usage here. But I think as well, like with eVTOL aircraft, which are a lot in composite, there's definitely like a lot of application in that market, definitely.
We've got a couple of eVTOL and drone projects and customers we're working with. Obviously, those things are, if you can reduce the weight, they can increase their battery range, flexibility, and increase their speed, depending on the application that they're going for. If it's military, obviously these things are meant to bang around and bump. And again, all drones typically will bang around and bump into things. And so increasing the strength of the propellers, which are often can be made of composites, but also the whole structural frame. Having a lighter, stronger, more impact-resistant composite by applying the helicoid is beneficial to all aspects of it.
No, that's amazing. What's your strategy and your vision for the company?
Yeah, so as I said, we've grown to about a dozen people now. Just engaged a new marketing team, so we're about to start in probably about 2 or 3 weeks a big marketing push to finally, so we can get a few more customers engaged. We've got a couple of contracts now, and we hope to obviously start rolling those out. I'll probably take the company public in the next 3 to 5 years. Could be sooner, could be later. That's just sort of my general long-term plan. But I'd like to first prove out that our technology has been adopted by significant name brand companies in multiple industries and on a global presence. At that point, as I said, we would look to maybe take it public. But also some of these companies we're talking to and those people involved that are listening to this podcast that know composites, there's a lot of big companies with 50,000 or more employees, and some of these big conglomerates, the Sabics, the Dow Chemicals, the BASFs, these companies often buy technologies too. And we've had conversations, lots of them, not yet for any kind of acquisition, but longer term, the company will either get taken out and or acquired that fashion, or I'll take it public.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to potentially do like some kind of like more technical presentation webinar, maybe even together to share that on that specific technology. That could be of interest.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of aerospace engineers in our organization that could give different podcasts. Again, a lot more technical and go into the details and make it aerospace specific. I'm obviously not an aerospace engineer, and I'm not an engineer at all, and I'm not an expert in composites, but I know enough to get myself in trouble. But I leave it to a very capable team that we have to do the deep dive with various customers and their various challenges and how Helicoid can help improve that. Again, I'm more on the finance, the legal, or the investment side. So again, we're raising some capital right now. This should be the last capital we need to raise. And then hopefully in the next few months, close on that. And then I can hire a few more engineers because we have arguably too many projects for our small team. So I'm running them pretty hard, so I do need to get them some help.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Chad, honestly, like for sharing all of that. Pretty impressive background, pretty impressive stories. The technology and the company look like amazing. Very, really, really impressed. Anything else that you want to share with us? Next steps on the side or anything?
No, but maybe I know you're going to put this out to your network. If we're also looking for more composite-specific engineers, so if anyone in your network is looking for a change and wants to be part of a new, upcoming, growing, disruptive company, please get in touch with me.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Chad, for being in this podcast. Really appreciate that you join and share the story.
Great. Pleasure's mine. Have a great day.
Thank you.